Okay.
I can't even remember what I was talking about, so I guess we'll abandon that bit.
And just go for it.
Abandon that bit. Enemy of the Gates 2, now with 4 times the snipers.
Stalingrad, back with a vengeance.
We'll jump back into this, but have a think about who could play the Nazi snipers if not Ed Harris. Have a think. We'll jump back to that.
Yeah. Let's go.
You start talking when I start talking. You can't do that, Sam. You shut your fucking mouth.
Okay.
Hello. Welcome to this week's episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast, a podcast where you delve into the mean city ruinscape of podcasting and hurl insults at each other while chasing Ed Harris around Stalingrad. My name's David.
As we do every week. My name's Sam, and vodka is a luxury we have. Caviar is a luxury we have. Podcasting is not. Not a bad Bob Hoskins impression there, I will say. If I'm gonna
Bob Hoskins.
That's there's a flashback to a now dead, but well remembered
great actor. Some really, really good movies. I wouldn't say this is one of his what's the word, like really standout performances, perhaps. But
no.
this week, because Sam's like a fucking nerd, basically, we watched Stalingrad from 2003. Is that right?
We watched Enemy at the Gates from 2001.
Oh yeah, sorry, we watched not Stalingrad. It's a movie about Stalingrad. Enemy at the Gates, which is actually from 2001.
So we had the title of the movie wrong, which is a rare one for us. And
I've had a bit of a day of it, so I apologise if all.
No. It's no excuse. Usual. It's absolutely no excuse whatsoever. So yes, we did Enemy at the Gates from 2001, and I love this movie. Just going to put it out there straight away. I think this is a fantastic, fun soap opera about Stalingrad and sniping, and there's just everything you could want from a early 2000s World War II epic. Thanks for listening, guys.
Like it's pulp. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. We watched a World War II movie the other day. Actually, we watched Unbroken, and I'd repressed it in my mind because it was so boring. And this movie isn't that. This is kind of the movie that kind of like is the inverse of that kind of war movie, where this is kind of like quite serious and obviously it's about Stalingrad and there's Nazis and people getting lined up and shot to save bullets. It's like really grim, but at the same time it's really fun. Like the actual mechanics of this movie are like really fun and silly. Everyone, it's like Star Wars villains though. Everyone's British because movies. It's like Hunt for Red October, where all of these Russians just have whatever accent the actors had, and they just thought, let's just roll with that. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of anyone in this movie who attempts a Russian accent. Maybe like the mother of the little kid has a bit of a twang.
Bob Hoskins, there's a couple of lines where he's like, where he's caviar is a luxury, and then which is his usual.
We'll fight them on the beaches. Shit, no, sorry, I'm not Churchill. I'm Khrushchev. Got you.
But then there is points where he is going, he is going for a slightly Russian accent. It's not unlike Carrie Fisher in the first Star Wars movie, where she's just veering wildly from California to posh English accents that she does. So I do think it is a little bit it is a little bit of a kind of a bit rough on that front. But as you say, a British movie. This was, when it was made, the most expensive British movie of all time, because it is pulpy, but it's also quite expansive, isn't it? Like there's a lot going on in this movie. We've got massive sets, we've got explosions, we've got a huge amount of extras, we've got some really, I think, interesting cinematography and as you say, it's just kind of fun in a way that this shouldn't be that fun. It's pretty grim. I mean, it's pretty grim stuff. But
Stalingrad historically is
not a laugh riot. Is that what you...
No. And it's
As wars
fascinating. It
go,
really,
as
really is
battles go.
fascinating. But in a war, full of like some of the bloodiest and the hardest fighting, really, and some of the grimmest things, Stalingrad had like a lot more than a lot of the other fronts already. Like even for the Eastern Front, Stalingrad was quite high in the body counts.
Number one, you're in Russia, and that's never a good place to be when you're don't have a land war in Asia and all that. And it's it's winter. Things are getting quite bad, and it's never good. But yeah, there is something singular about the Stalingrad. Now go on.
I was going to say it's quite brave almost to do a movie about Stalingrad. I will say, just to sort of like excuse myself for earlier, that the French title for this movie was Stalingrad. So
of course, and with you and your fantastic knowledge of the French language, you were clearly browsing Netflix in French.
I'm a Francophile. Don't you attack me, Sam?
You're a Francophile because you've read some fucking sharp books. Is the extent that you're going
Thanks.
anywhere near to that?
I've read French novels in the English translations.
Well,
I've been to France.
Yeah.
I've spoken English. Anyway, regardless of that, it's quite a brave movie to try and make. I'm just thinking what the budget of this movie was.
I'll find it.
68 million.
68 million. That's a lot, isn't it? I mean, that is a lot.
It's a lot, and it
isn't.
It's a lot for a movie. And obviously, you've got I relatively early on in his career. You've got Rachel Weisz relatively early on in her career. I suppose she'd broken out with The Mummy, but again, Ed Harris has never been, I don't think, like an AAA list guy, even though he absolutely deserves it. But do you know what I mean? He's not. So, like, the cast wise, I think you can sort of like get for a reasonable amount of money. The reason I think the budget for this is quite low is just because the sheer amount of sets you've got to build. There's a testament to 2001 where most of the cities which had been blown up for various economic and mostly economic reasons were in the Middle East. So they kind of had to build all the sets, and portray this destroyed city, like largely without like heavy use of CGI because it's only 2001. So I think there's some mirroring and stuff going on, and some matte paintings, but largely you've kind of got to build the sets for these people to crawl around in. And it just seems like they did quite well for that and the production design for this budget.
Yeah, no, I think it really does. In so many ways, a lot of this movies like this are about the environments and the city. Stalingrad is such a character in this movie as well. And you
piles of rubble, yes.
Well, yeah, what was left of it, and you get. I think what I like about this film, and it's one of the ones that I've watched when I was probably maybe it came out. I have this very distinct memory of downloading this on LimeWire or BearShare, or do you remember them in the early?
And it wasn't porn. Weird.
No, or my favorite one was like enemyofthegates.exe. and me thinking, you're not going to get me. Because
God, I don't think anyone younger than 30 would even remotely understand what you're talking about. Isn't that a phenomenal sign of aging?
Because on these peer-to-peer sharing things, where you would download a file and you think, why is that movie only 50 meg? Oh well, I'd be fine. Oh, I've got to double click it to install the movie. Okay, sure. Oh no.
Oh no, my computer's exploded in a ball of flame. Fantastic.
But luckily, in those days, you could just wipe your entire computer and it'd be fine.
Exactly. You could just
reinstall
the hard drive out
three times a week.
Yeah. A cracked copy of XP as well. I don't think I ever paid for XP.
This is such a nostalgia rush, and so this was definitely one of those films. I
always confuse this with the I want to say Owen Wilson film where he's Behind Enemy Lines, maybe.
Behind Enemy Lines. Yeah, that is a different movie. That's like Cold War, isn't it? Same year, actually.
Yeah, it's Cold War in. Yeah, but it's got because it's a war movie. It's got a similar aesthetic. He parachutes out of a out of a jet, and basically he is behind enemy lines. I think
He's
it's somewhere in
uncovering the genocide during the Bosnian War. This looks. I don't think I've seen this. Gene Hackman.
It's a really cool movie. I can't comment on the quality of it, but like that's what I thought when you said let's watch Enemy at the Gates. That's what my mind thought was, let's watch that. Or is it the Daniel Craig Downfall? Is it the other World War II one? Anyway, but there was a couple of movies I conflated with this.
Downfall is the Nazi, is the Hitler rant one. The famous.
Oh, what am I thinking of? There's one with Daniel Craig anyway, where he's a soldier doing stuff.
Well, this is all sounds. I'm a man in my like mid-30s. Am I 33? Is that mid yet? Am I mid-30s? I'm early 30s. I'm going to stick with that. And I am becoming inevitably, as night turns to day, a dad. I've been a dad for 7 years, but now I'm really getting in there because I'm like, wow, World War II. Let's learn about tanks. Fantastic. Let's learn about battles. Let's read books about. Look, a 50-part series on YouTube of.
I think we all have dad tendencies, and I think there's like a triumvirate of dad tendencies, aren't there? There's World War II stuff, and that extends to like learning about the tanks, dragging your kids to museums, boring museums. Westerns, which I've been guilty of for about 10 years, like just spending your entire afternoon watching one 5-hour-long Western where realistically not a lot happens on one soundstage, and all the Native Americans are portrayed by, if you're lucky, Mexicans, if you're fucking lucky. Otherwise, it's some fucking French guy in makeup. I've loved that for years. There's that, and then there's like sports, but I don't mean like the NFL. I mean like watching cricket for 18 hours or however long cricket takes.
No, I'm sorry, Dave. The NFL counts. The NFL definitely counts. It's hitting that age, isn't it, of just being interested. And we're massive nerds, and we have a podcast anyway, so we're already pretty fucking sad. But this is one of those movies that I've when we were making our picks, I thought, oh, brilliant! What a great thing to explore. I just loved every minute of this movie because it is one of those formative ones when I was younger that I watched and was like, wow, war's cool. And now I'm a bit like, I'm not so into the war, but also that's pretty cool. And yet, I think there is something a little bit more substantial here than just like trashy war movie. Like there is, I think, a pretty well told story. I think it structurally makes sense. Like all the story beats are there. I think it sets up almost everything that it pays off everything that it sets off pretty much. And what you're left with, I think, is a good morality tale as well,
Yeah. We should dive into the plot in a minute, and I want a plot summary. There was one thing I wanted to mention before we get into that, was there's another reason why this movie is quite as seared into our brains as it is. I'm sure I've seen this before, especially like in bits, but they kind of reuse a lot of this movie in that first Call of Duty game that came out in 2003. Quite a lot of this stuff scene for scene, like the I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but the scene where Jude Law gets handed the clip, like he gets handed like 5 bullets, and it's like, right, well, you just wait till someone gets shot, and then someone will get shot.
The first man falls, the second man picks up his rifle and shoots.
Exactly. And that's like a big part of how like Call of Duty game starts. And obviously, let's not get to that series as a whole in a more modern way. But that was like a huge blockbuster game that takes a lot. Like even the rest of the plot of that game follows Enemy at the Gates quite solidly. And so for us, especially having grown up playing it, like it's then you're sort of doubling down. And we haven't yet done our Last of Us episode, but I was about to make out like we'd already done it. But like the way that storytelling in video games can sometimes stick with you a little bit more solidly than maybe a movie you've only seen once.
Because you do it 40 times because you can't get past.
Yeah, because you keep fucking getting shot by especially there is a sniper duel mission, I think, and it is quite tricky to actually get the other sniper. So you do get shot in the head like 50,000 times.
Yeah, this film definitely it created that aura of like snipers, cool. Like because there's just it's I'm not sure how I think it's quite ahistorical in a lot of sense. Like there isn't really like, is there any point in snipers just spending all their time just trying to kill each other? Like, does that serve any
Well,
strategic purpose?
to be a
Not
nerd
really.
for a minute, like
Not really.
the first foot war where sharpshooters, not snipers, because the fucking rifles were shite, is like the American Civil War is the first big conflict where you've got snipers, and that's kind of like, and the reason you had snipers wasn't to kill other snipers. You basically pick off all the officers because they'd
Yeah.
all be wearing like gold and swords and shit.
Mhm.
And then what happens is then you've got a big mass of unorganized people who don't know what they're doing because you've killed all the managers basically. So they're all like, oh. And then that follows through to like World War II, where it's more or less the same thing, really. You know, snipers aren't trying to get like just, you know, like rack up kills. They're trying to kill officers. Like more recently in the war in Ukraine, the Ukrainians have been doing this. They've just been like more or less assassinating like Russian generals and things and colonels and stuff like that as like a really good way of crippling their like tactical ability. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting to see, but that's what snipers are doing. Whereas in this movie, obviously, it's kind of like it's almost like two samurai having like this epic honorable duel, except it's snipers crawling around shit in Stalingrad. But it's trying to impose that kind of like that
Yeah,
sort
there
of
is
martial combat sort of thing to it, isn't it?
And that's
Which is a bit atypical, I believe.
Yeah, completely. And so in real life, this is based off, and this story comes from Vasily Zaitsev, who was a real sniper, kind of like lionized by the Soviets. Naturally, was a hero of Stalin, all this stuff. And I think he said that over 3 days, this battle happened between the two snipers. Interestingly, there's no actual record that this guy exists. The only record is that Vasily Zaitsev said it, and he was, a tool of the Soviet state, and so probably
there's a tendency to assume there that if the Nazis are keeping meticulous records about concentration camps, they've probably got this guy's name written down somewhere.
Well, they've got the name written down.
Would be the argument, wouldn't it?
Zaitsev said that he'd killed like 400 people or something, and obviously then the nerds and the historians were like, well, wait a minute. So apparently the Germans only started training snipers in 1943. This happens in like 6 months later or something. And so he'd have to have racked up like 400 kills in 6 months and then ship him in. He's also a major, which is like, well, no, Germans didn't promote their snipers because they want them to carry on sniping, not be thrust into leadership positions, which is what a major would have done. So there's lots of things where there's no record of this.
There's a lot of it, it's propagandized, and this guy was a sniper in the war, and then a version of this might have existed, and certainly I believe that obviously sniping and counter sniping did exist in World War II, and definitely in Stalingrad, and especially with the Russians who had like such an enormous amount of snipers. A lot of them were women. We'll circle back to that. And racking up kill counts of 250 people and things like that, but it wouldn't be, that wasn't 250 snipers because, again, that wasn't the game.
Yeah. But what's our golden rule? Now, we just got to really resist just talking about history. Welcome to this history cast. What's our rule, though, when it comes to historical movies, which is fucking throw that shit out.
Make it entertaining.
Make it entertaining. 100%. Make it up.
100%.
And give us all of the juicy details that aren't in the history books, and who cares if it happened, because that's what makes a good story. Now, I've already mentioned it, but this is my favorite thing about this movie is that, yes, there's lots of cool action, and it's really, I think, really well set up. You understand the space that the characters are all fighting in and everything. But my favorite thing is that there's actually a really good story here. There's the conflict between Vasily Zaitsev and Lord Nepotism, the fifth Duke of Nepotism, which we've, I think, learned that the Fiennes family is just absolutely ridiculous. If you go on their Wikipedia page, every single one of them has a fucking Wikipedia page. because they're all actors and they're all just chummy people who've been living in chummy land for the last 400 years. It's fantastic. But they've got a great conflict. They've got this love triangle going on. They've also got the Major coming in as this great antagonist. We've got poor little Sasha who's selling Russian secrets to the Germans.
Nasty collaborator. It's a bad look. It's a bad look.
He's playing both sides.
So he always comes out on top, hanging from a lamppost. We'll circle back to that. Do you have a plot summary in front of you, Sam? So you can just sort of and we can go from there.
Yeah, it's not very good when a Russian and German sniper play a game of cat and mouse during the Battle of Stalingrad, which is what we've pretty much said. So all of these things are happening. Hold on. All of these stories are happening on a platform of something that's really interesting, like the war in itself, and it's overly dramatic, and it's really like turned up to 11, and you've got this score, this music going in the background, which is just like very typically 1994 of the Soviet Union kind of music going on. I think all of it ties together in this, as you say, pulpy, over dramatic, beautiful mess of a movie.
Quite silly, isn't it? Like, so you can sort of roughly. I like the intro to this movie. I think is where a lot of the more famous and like kind of repeated scenes come from, which is kind of like from the start of the movie up until you have the moment where fucking nepotism finds 7th Earl of fucking my dad's got money, mate, whoever he is. Not Ralph Fiennes, not the good one. Basically, not the best one. Up until the point, so from the beginning of the movie, up until the point where he writes his letter about how fucking amazing this guy is and how big his dick is. I mean, how many Germans he's killed with his rifle, or whatever it is. So you've got the which also, by the way, is kind of the most rife with like not even historical inaccuracy, just historical lies, which I do want to touch on, not because they annoyed me, just because it's funny how like so many things are repeated from this movie as if they are fact when actually they are based on nothing. So you've got when the man in front of you falls, the second man picks up the rifle. Really, really cool scene, really powerful. I think it gets across a lot of stuff. Obviously, this did happen a little.
Not like this though.
Actually, the Russians mostly didn't have boots and things and uniforms. That's what you'd be missing. You'd have a gun, but you might not have a uniform or boots or winter gear or any fucking food. But this is odd. And some of the ways they treat troops. So there's an interesting thing in wars, especially World War II, where you have like penal battalions, which is usually like deserters and other criminals and things, who will get put into this one big battalion, and essentially they are quite poorly armed and equipped, and they'll be your like essentially we need to go in and sort of
barrier troops,
plot enemy defenses. So they would just send these troops in, and then if any of them ran away, they'd shoot them, because ultimately these are kind of people that, do you know what I mean? They're just above that line of we were gonna shoot them anyway. But this isn't what Vasily, his character, is in. I'm not sure any army ever set up machine guns. I'm not sure the tactical sense in setting up machine guns behind your own troops.
There were troops. There are Soviets, and many armies have troops which basically would capture them. If anyone retreated, would say, right, fuck it, you're with me then. So you're going to go dig coal now for the rest of your life, or we're going to round you up and put you into one of these penal battalions. But there's very little evidence to suggest they were machine, because number one,
you're too busy shooting the Germans. You don't have time to be shooting. You've got
a spare machine gun. Yeah, like no, don't do that. You just shoot at the Germans. And although what is realistic is the human wave strategy. That was a big part of how the Soviets. I mean, it's horrible because you just have to.
The whole fucking war. World War One was basically this, wasn't it?
World War One, just run at the enemy until you get cut down, and then I don't know. That's it. Like, do that over and over again. Gain a few inches, and Stalingrad was famous for being a battle over streets, a battle over runs. They really did fight so closely. So
for a couple of years as well. It was not a short battle.
No, it's also I think because it's the Soviets, because it's the late 20th or early 20th, 21st century. there is a sense of, oh yeah, the Russians would do this, wouldn't they? As
Well,
opposed
this
to
is what I'm saying about like it's the off-repeated thing about oh yeah, of course Russians have got so many men, and it's the trope, isn't it? Russians have got so many men that they just throw them away. And yes, absolutely 100% that did happen, but maybe not quite a thing of like, well, let's kind of fight the Germans, but mostly let's just mow our own men down to like prove a point.
no one step
Um,
back.
so you have this cool scene, even with that, I think it's quite well shot. The action's good, and that culminates in the Earl of Nepotism and Vasily kind of like by this fountain, and Nepo baby's injured, and Vasily. So like, there's like the Germans have won. So there's like 7 or 8 Germans kind of like milling around, and basically Vasily, because he's a really fucking like he's such a precious hero baby. He just shoots all of these guys, and like I love this scene. I think it's really, really well done. And you've got Fiennes kind of like almost like sobbing, like, "Oh my god, he's so brilliant!" And it was like, it's fine, it works really well. But he shoots these sort of 7 or 8 Germans who are showering or whatever, and then it's like, right, to the press, you're a fucking hero. The Russians need a hero because guess what? The war isn't going so well for us at the time, and that's like, and then you're kind of into the action of the movie, and it's kind of like it helps the pacing loads that you have action, and then we're like, right, we're fucking running around, we're learning how to be a sniper, we've almost got the twirling newspaper in the middle, like no. Vasily kills 400 Germans.
Continues his rise to fame. You're nailing the energy, I think, of this, because it's quite quick, isn't it? You go from being terrified to being, the scene on the boat when they're coming across, and it's just like, what the fuck is going on? It's absolutely horrifying.
It's claustrophobic and it's scary, and it's good war movie fare.
It really is, and I think it's a great opening to a movie.
And if you can stop yourself thinking, what are all these British soldiers doing in Stalingrad?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I think it was shot in Germany, I think, is where most of it was shot.
I actually think it's a good choice to just have, because I think largely they just said to everyone, just do a sort of English accent, and everyone's doing a similar accent.
That's what they used to do. That's what they used to do in old-fashioned
Hunt for Red October.
And they'd have the British guys would often be German, and then the Americans would be the Americans, and so you'd know, oh, if he's British, then he's a German. Basically.
Yeah, the French people would have moustaches. It was very, very simple.
It's very
the Italians would have a smaller moustache. It's very, very simple.
It was onions and pasta draped around their necks. It was very simple to understand.
It's just Lions t-shirts, striped t-shirts.
Why are you wearing that? It's not very camouflage. It's World War II. So
unfortunately, the English-speaking cinema-going audience is quite racist.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. So there's all this opening, and then, as you say, they pick up the pace pretty quickly. So you're getting into the thing, and you're learning how this sniping stuff goes. There's a great, and this is my second kind of thing. So story's great, concept of the movie's great. But I think the actual staging of all these different scenes, especially the sniping ones, the one in the department store where we get the first appearance of Ed Harris as a sniping force, and it's Zaitsev, so Jude Law, and Sophia Ross as Ludmilla. They're running through the store, and there's these planes overhead that are bombing the shit out of the streets, and I think it's really easy to take for granted how well structured this whole scene is, because you've got quite a lot of, like, you're on multiple different levels. There's people above you and people below you, and the characters are moving around quite a lot. And I think for the most part, you manage to keep your frame of reference really well, so that you can enjoy the hunt almost. The way that they're looking for each other, and there's all of these mannequins everywhere, and like all of that, I think is such a great. I think it teaches you a lot about the things that you need to look out for, which is, no, you only fire once, and then you have to move. All these other things that are going to give you away, and how they're all camouflaged and all that. I just think it's a great and it's easy to forget how difficult that is to do sometimes as well.
Yeah, it's good. It's good movie making. It kind of, like you said, it portrays, I think, as well as sniping, just generally, I think portrays the way that Stalingrad was, in that, you know, you have that first kind of like rush with the Russian troops, and then the battle kind of did devolve into, like you said, street fighting, and honestly, like a lot of booby traps stuff was developed in this battle. You know, stuff that we still use now as like a right. Well, we're going to have to fall back, but let's rig all of these buildings so the minute a German steps in it, it just collapses. And vice versa. And obviously, similarly, you had these kind of like, you know, snipers would just kill anyone if you, the minute you sort of like let your guard down. That's when, you know, a cell of 3 or 4 people just, and even today we have this kind of like insurgency is the word, but in, you know, a city that isn't really occupied by either person. You just got this battleground where you can't have a battle, and I think it captures that quite well, and the claustrophobia of that, and the uncertainness of that, like, and later on as well, where they're all kind of like they've got these underground like bunkers and things, and these safe spaces, and they're like, oh, have you, you know, did you hear that such and such died, or like, oh, we think such and such is dead because no one's seen him in 3 weeks, and it's kind of like, right, well, it's not, you know, obviously you don't know, like when they think Vasily's dead later and he's not, and it's like, yeah, because until he shows his face somewhere and someone who knows him says that's Vasily, like obviously we just think he's dead.
Yeah.
They capture that quite well. I like a lot of the running around with the sniper teams. We don't really get a lot of development for these people, but I like the guns that are kind of like like rags tied around them and things.
Wrapped up for camouflage. Yeah.
Someone's paid attention to the production design. It's not like astounding, but it's good. It's solid, and it lends itself to the movie feeling very lived in.
Yeah. There's lots of texture like that, isn't there? There's a lot of textures. The scenes when all of the soldiers are all huddled together in their, you know, their kind of the little base that they're in at night, and there's lots of like, you can almost smell it. You can smell the, you know, the food that's being cooked and the bodies and all this. Like,
we've never smelled anything that bad, Sam.
No. And I just think there's lots of examples of that. You mentioned production design, like we've talked about the sets, we've talked about some of the props. I mean, the full costumes and everything, like it feels, and this is where I think it can be dangerous from a historical point of view of thinking it feels historic, it feels close enough, it feels accurate, and it's probably not in a lot of senses, but
it's the purest form of Hollywood production design, but in a way that's good because everyone's just wearing olive like fatigues. Basically, it's probably US Army surplus or UK Army surplus, like, because it's cheap. Again, if you had a proper like military history nerd, they'd be telling you about buttons and all sorts of things, and I don't think any of that matters. I think this movie's fun and like, but it just feels lived in enough. Like, a bit like Star Wars. You know, it feels lived in. Like Rogue One felt lived in enough that it's like a lot of it felt more real because of that, as opposed to maybe the prequel films. Which, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. So as we go through, like the way that Danilov, the Pope Joseph finds the way that he, because he's like a political officer of the, you know, the Soviet machine, he's becoming more and more invested in Zaitsev as like a story, I think, which again is interesting and kind of reflects how he the real Zaitsev was treated. So him again boosting him up, and also there's a great bit where Hoskin says to him, you know, it seems like your fate is tied to Zaitsev as well, you know, because if he succeeds, and he's put all of his energy into making sure that this story can be told, and that's, I just think that there's another aspect, again, great storytelling. It ties them together, and it means that when they're working almost as a team. They're like brothers at the start, even though they just met by chance. And then we introduce the one thing that could break them apart, which is, and that I think, Dave, if it was
2001 Rachel Weisz, that's right.
Hello,
Sexual Awakening.
Me and you, Rachel. I mean, it's happening. Sorry, man, it's over. It's I'm gonna
I will say just as a
sacrifice you
first point,
immediately.
I really don't love the Oliver Twist look that they give her in a lot of this film. And
Please,
that
I
is the
can have some more.
that is the closest, like, because she is a grubby waif, and it's like, but no one else is. And they've obviously been like, right, she's a really good looking woman, and we don't want to hide that, right? So she's really pale. We're not going to like
But
claw
it
her
is
in.
the
Do you know
Battle
what I
of
mean?
Stalingrad.
Like,
So
Jude Law is quite disgusting in this, quite a lot of it, and Ron Perlman as well, and Ed Harris. They're quite filthy, a lot of the movie. But again, men, obviously the patriarchy is strong, so Rachel Weisz has to
we
be
can't
like,
make her look ugly, can we? But we can't make her
so
look
they have kind of
really pretty.
like so much mascara to make those big eyes pop. And then like 2 like grubby lines down like coal marks, again like Oliver Twist. And this like I don't know what's the term for the hat. It's like a
I don't
military beret type
know.
thing that she's wearing, like, and it's like, right, okay, so obviously we decided this is the look we were going for, and then that's more or less what she looks like for the whole movie. And it's fine, but it's kind of like at the same time, like, it's a really distinct choice, and I'm not sure I love it.
Yeah, and it kind of symbolizes her role in the movie, doesn't it? In a lot of ways, where I mean, she gets a chance to get her hands dirty a little bit, but really she is the object of their affection.
His wife,
yeah,
basically, yeah. Which is the term they use on the Bechtel cast. It's she is his wife.
Yeah, she's been wifed. She's been wifed. It is a shame because I think it's like you could have, as much as I like the love triangle, but I think you could have just given her a bit more agency. As I mean, that's the classic thing
Just
of
a
any
bit more
woman in the movie.
backstory. I mean, it's a real
Some
one thing that
agency.
bothered me actually was just in terms of like the way that the movie sacrifices things to have obviously because they want to focus on Ed Harris and Jude Law. Like, you have a speech from her about the Germans basically driving her family out and then shooting them all, like, which is powerful and you know, great. We've given you a real reason, but also like that wouldn't be that expensive to film. You could film a version of that and like show us it, and maybe have us know one of these parents. Maybe have it be this useless mother of this little boy, like, because she's a very non-character as well. Like, maybe have it be her and she's shot in the head, and suddenly we care. Not that we don't care, but obviously we've been watching people get blown apart for the whole 45 minutes until this point.
I'm a bit numb to it by now. Yeah,
yeah, and it's also you feel a little bit robbed because like if Vasily's like quite a famous hero of the Soviet Republic, but even more so, there was a female sniper who I think there is a nod to in this movie.
Well, Ludmilla, who I mentioned earlier, I think that's who. That's
certainly the first of Ludmilla Pavlichenko.
Yeah.
He was a sniper in the Second World War for the Russians.
The deadliest female sniper in history with 309 kills, apparently.
Yeah, like, it's a shocking amount. And it's almost like they knew about this, but they're obviously telling a story. But maybe they could have like had Rachel Weisz be a bit more of this character, like have a bit more, because they take stuff directly from this lady's sort of like life. Like when Rachel Weisz gets injured at the end and wakes up in a hospital, I think that's something that happened to Pavlichenko and things like that. And her partner, her like husband, in fact, was also a sniper and he got killed. So you'd almost feel like actually the better story would have had her be the main character, and then do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that, you know, you make a choice and you do the story you want to do, but I feel a bit robbed of this story, which I think is just a bit more powerful because you know, if you take all of this and you add the fact that this is a woman in a time where women typically didn't have like tons of agency and recognition, like fighting for the motherland, suddenly you've got a bit more of an evocative thing than the motivations, which are Vasily kind of seems to care about Russia not falling, sort of. He's got a granddad. That's something, apparently. I never really put my finger on that. And Ed Harris is shooting at Vasily because his son got killed in Stalingrad. And he's like, my son. And so he leaves his sniper school, which also didn't exist, and goes to start. This is where it all starts to fall apart. And you're like, if you look at any of this in the light, you're like, oh.
shut up, shut up, shut up. New scene, move on. Next, here we go. We're in the tractor factory now.
And that's
now
a
it's cool
testament to the
again.
movie, is that you aren't thinking this when you're watching it. Like, even an arch nerds like us who know a lot of this, you're not thinking of this when you're watching it. You're just enjoying it, and you're enjoying the fact that the acting's so good. But then when you finish it, you're like, oh, I wish they'd done. I wish they'd told, and I wish they'd, you know.
Yeah, I think it doesn't make. I mean, to the point about Ludmila Pavlichenko, you think, well, it's weird. Why would you not just have her in it? You know,
To then
and
have a character called Ludmilla as well, it just seems like
that's clearly just a little reference, isn't it? But yeah, there's lots of choices. But I think I mean, we are talking about early 2000s, late 90s when this was being developed. So I think maybe some of our progressive ideas, like having a woman with agency, are just far too advanced for 30
I think I've
years ago.
in my brain where we had movies with women before, like 2001, surely.
Oh, we did, Dave. Of course, we had women in. I mean, yeah, we can't just ignore them.
Pretty Woman, that's a feminist masterpiece.
Yeah, yeah. Notting Hill and Bridget
Sleepless in
Jones'
Seattle,
Diary.
You've Got Mail. That's a great film about a man manipulating a woman.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right, Sam. Maybe it
Problem
would bear
solved.
looking at some more of these things and being like, well, maybe we should shine a light on, when did women start to get agency in movies?
Yeah.
When was the first female-led action movie that wasn't an erotic movie? That's an important distinction.
I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Not sure we've done it yet. Not sure we've done it yet.
No. And I think that's probably where we will remain for many, many decades yet. But it is. You know, yeah. You mentioned like you don't notice this all the way while you're watching the movie. And I think that is where, again, I think the production values of this, the whole idea that you can keep the concept of this movie going for as long as it is, as long as they manage to pull it off. How long is it? It's
160 minutes.
131 minutes.
2010.
Yeah, 131 minutes. So, like, we're not pushing it beyond the realms, but I have not once looked at my watch and said how long have we got left. Like, it's one of those movies I think they manages to roll from from one scene. We get a nice kind of downtime where we can have those more emotional conversations, or
there's not
awkward sex scenes in this movie.
Oh yeah, this is some awkward fucking sex. This is some two Russian soldiers having sex in 1944 sex.
It felt quite realistic to me, though. Do you know what I mean? Like they're doing it in this with a line next to a bunch of other.
I'm so glad it wasn't like
candlelit
lit with silks and they stripped off, because guess what? You're living in a sewer. You probably don't want to take all your clothes off. Like, it's probably going to be pretty filthy and disgusting. Like, it's probably quite cold.
Probably washing is quite hard. You know, like, so why would you then get everything off? And like,
and it's not really a sexy sex scene, to its credit, which, you know,
it goes on a little bit too long. It goes on just
a little bit, but it felt
long.
more germane to the story than it would have done if it was like a magical wow wow, and we have a striptease.
It was about the two characters connecting and them also, you know, I think it weirdly it's also about Nepo. What's his name?
Nepo baby. Nepo finds
Danilov. It's about Danilov. Now he's gone out the triangle. The triangle is now a line, you know. So, and I think
it's a tale as old as time that we get in loads of movies. It's like, oh, this nerdy guy likes this woman, but guess what? His mate who murders people for a living. Oh, she's like, oh yeah, he murders people. Fantastic.
I mean, he literally just said, you know, he's like, stay here with me and you'll be safe. And she's willing to jump into one of the deadliest battles of World War II.
Again, that's kind of like the idea is it's
with this guy.
I think it's fine. I think the love triangle is good. I think they do waste a few of their shots sometimes. I think we'll talk about Ed Harris at the end, I think, because it's its own sort of separate thing. Mm-hmm. But when Danilov dies, when Nepo baby dies,
it's the
most pointless death in the entire movie. I really actually hated it. Like, in theory, I like the idea of it. The kind of like the I'm going to show you where he is. I'm still your friend. I've forgiven you. What have I done? Like, I really liked that. I liked that as a like a through line of these two guys are, they care about one another. They've been
The
through
arc,
hell
yeah.
together.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that arc. What I didn't like was him standing up and getting shot inside the head, and Jude Law's lying there going, "Oh my god," and not paying any attention to where a sniper might be. And then we have our cake and fuck it too, because apparently that shows him where Ed Harris is, so then he can go down to the railway tracks and hide behind a train. And you're like, it's just one part of the movie where the geography of the sniping fell apart for me a little.
100%, 100%.
Because they wanted to have them locking eyes, and I'm like, yeah, but you can't really have that in a sniper battle. You can't have him basically drive a bayonet to his heart through his ribs, because they're fucking snipers. They're hundreds of yards apart.
Yeah,
but again,
the geography of the sniping, I think, is a very good way of describing what I've been talking about.
In the rest of the movie, I think it works really well.
You're completely right, and it doesn't here, because I think they want the close up. That they, to be fair, they never actually lock eyes, because he turns and then poof, gets shot in the head. Ed Harris.
He sees him and he takes his hat off, doesn't he? And he's like, and he knows. But like the rest of the geography of the sniping, I think it's really good. The bit in the factory where they're crawling through the pipe. Rachel Weisz is there.
I love that scene with the glass, and he's having
the glass, yeah, and the way they've got to like communicate with each other, I think, is really, really interesting. And he knows where he is, and so he's got to communicate that. That's really good. The bit where Ron Perlman gets it is also a good scene, because there's a lot of tension there. Whether he's got the helmet on a string and he's like the sage old, like he's Ron Perlman, so he's going to be the sage guy who's going to come in and know everything.
I love this performance. It's great. Such a fun.
Fucking, do you remember the Call of Duty game? Like, he's literally in that. There's literally like a Russian sergeant that you follow around who teaches you how to snipe.
They knew what they were doing.
They did. How didn't they get sued? So they're doing all that.
Do you remember Medal of Honor? Sorry, do you remember Medal of Honor Frontline?
I've never played a lot of the Medal of Honors.
Well, the first scene
is Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan on Omaha Beach. I mean, it's the same with Hell Let Loose now, isn't it? All these, they're just copying and pasting.
Yeah, just rob it. It's an homage. It's not libel. Not libel. Sorry, it's not intellectual property theft. But the scene where Ron Perlman gets it is also good, because you've got the tension of that. That Ed Harris has seen the helmet, but there's like a reason he hasn't shot it. He's reloading or something. But they think, oh, well, he must not be there. So they kind of relax a bit. But then that he's there. So kind of like the tension is really well, that you understand enough about it as a viewer who is not a sniper and therefore doesn't understand whether this is even realistic. Like, enough about the relative things. So Jude Law's going to jump across this little gap first. And then Ron Perlman like stops him again and says, no, I'll jump first. But then your brain's
such a cheater. It's my turn. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you think, oh, well, then Jude Law's going to get shot, and he doesn't. He gets shot, and that's a great kill. It's probably the best kill in the movie, to be perfectly honest. He like jumps and he goes, poof, and his head spins around and he falls, and Jude Law's like jumping behind him. And he's like, oh my god, as he jumps past.
Yeah,
it's a good death. You don't really see it coming, like not quite. And it's again the way that this movie's paced well, where you're not sat thinking, right, next scene, because you're kind of in the action, and they're giving you enough to like follow it, and that's quite a hard thing to do, I think, with something like this.
Yeah. It's one of those movies. I watched it yesterday and I could watch it again right now. You know what I mean? It's a rare thing for me. I'm usually like, it's me done for at least a year, if not more. But it's just such a good in a way that's weird, because it is so violent, it is so depressing, and there's
it's a testament to the flow of the movie, I think. And not all movies have this pacing. Yeah. Not all movies have this kind of natural flow to them. I mean, it's something we comment a lot on movies where they feel a bit disjointed, or you get that third act kind of like I'm falling asleep. What are we doing? Yeah. I think this movie is quite tight. I'd be interested to see what they cut, because obviously it's quite long generally for a 2001 movie. That is
2 hours odd is 2 of 10, is it? We say so. It's not too bad.
Yeah, but it's all relative. If we're talking about like up until the sort of the early 80s, any movie under 3 hours is relatively normal, and then you sort of like movies then become sort of 90 minutes to 2 hours. Anything more than 2 hours becomes a bit much, and we've kind of gone the other way again now, where movies are trending towards 3 hours again, and a 90-minute movie is the rarity.
God save us. God save us from that.
God save us all.
Let's talk about Ed Harris. I mean, this is one of those movies I think we could either break down into scene by scene detail, and I'd be able to talk about it for 7 hours, or we could try and contain ourselves to sub 1 hour just to try and,
Well,
because it's
let's
otherwise.
just talk about Ed Harris in a brief fashion. Ed Harris plays a great baddie.
I love Ed Harris. I love Ed Harris in this. I love him in The Truman Show, and I love him in Apollo 13.
Westworld.
And Westworld as well. I mean, there's such a fantastic, like, what is it? What is it? Apparently, they chose Jude Law and Ed Harris based on their ability to express with their eyes.
He's got crinkly eyes, hasn't he? Like
because there's obviously lots of
them.
scenes where he's, they're just close-ups or literally just their eyes that you see.
Yeah.
I don't think he was first. I think he came in quite late in the process, so he kind of rocked up.
I presume they initially wanted someone younger.
I don't know.
They probably wanted, but they probably wanted somebody. They wanted the anti-Jude Law. They wanted, it would be God. Who are the X-Men wankers? James McAvoy and the German. He's got a German name. The other guy. They want someone like that, I think, but they just basically couldn't find the right fit. So they chose Ed Harris, who is a bit of an odd choice because I think he was maybe around sort of mid-40s, early 50s here.
Yeah, 50s, I would say.
And I think that's what on the cusp of where your brain goes, well, would this guy be fighting in Stalingrad at this age? And they make him a major, I think, because of his age. Because if it's King's second lieutenant Harris, you're like, well, fuck, how did this guy fuck his life up?
And exactly, and as we said, this guy probably did not exist in this way anyway. But the understated way that Harris plays, I think, is really good. Also, then the relationship between him and Sasha, who was in have we talked about this already? My Family. Do you remember this? Does anyone else remember this? My Family from 2000.
God, can we explain this to non-British people in the 30s? My Family was a family sitcom, but shitter. It was a family. It was a family sitcom with Zoe Wanamaker played the mum, and who was the dad?
Oh Christ, Robert.
He's done very little since, I think.
Robert Lindsay.
Zoe Wanamaker. Robert Lindsay. Zoe Wanamaker is kind of Wanamaker is a top tier, British actor in terms of she's in fucking everything. And voices loads of things. And it was the two of them and their
Quidditch coach,
Madam Hooch. So there's and they're 3 kids, and Robert Lindsay is a dentist, and she, I think, is initially a homemaker, and then she has a job doing something or other, and it's basically like middle class dysfunction. And they have a neighbor who they don't like.
Kids, and then one of the kids is played
by this kid who plays Sasha.
By Sasha. Gabrielle Thompson plays Sasha Philippou, who is who I think is doing a fine job. But his massive My Family detour, then, my God. But Ed Harris and Sasha, they have this great playing off each other, and he's giving him chocolate and food and all this other, and
it's this cool thing where we see a lot of the Russian high command, don't we? And a lot of the Russian sort of, and there was obviously a choice made that we don't really want to spend the money to have a Nazi camp. Do you know what I mean? And we don't really want to lean on. I think they don't want to lean on the Nazi thing because it maybe takes away from the nobility of this sniper duel. If I'm expressing myself correctly there. I think they really don't want to pay.
The damn Nazis ruined World War II.
They've ruined everything. Because although they've really made that Indiana Jones series a lot better, I will say that they've really they're a top tier baddie when they're a baddie.
But we can't enjoy World War II. We can't enjoy it because there's fucking Nazis in it. Oh, God damn it! And it's fun. It's fun in the 80s when the Nazis are just a thing from the past. But now the Nazis are back. God, I mean,
in hog form.
They're everywhere.
They
God
are.
Damn Nazis.
But it's cool. So we basically all the scenes with Ed Harris and Sasha, this kid, it's like Ed Harris, an orderly or someone who works for him, just in this broken down house, and I think it's fine. It's contained. The story isn't about Ed Harris interacting with Nazi command, but they're really clear about a lot of things. The Nazis want. The Germans really want Vasily dead because they understand like it's an important propaganda piece for the battle. And like I said, Stalingrad historically went on for forever. There's a lot of deaths, and you had the whole Sixth Army ended up surrendering. It was a fucking PR nightmare for the Nazis, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Which seems like a reductive way of saying it, that the Battle of Stalingrad was a PR nightmare for the Nazis. But it kind of really was, just came down to that. They could have coped with the manpower. They could have coped with, the time and the resources invested. But like they really couldn't cope with the fact that they just cocked it right up.
Yeah. Well, it's the whole Russian invasion was never a good thing, was it, for the Nazis?
But so we have this kind of like cat and mouse game where you've got Ed Harris is trying to find Vasily. He nearly gets him when he kills the rest of the sniper team, including the Asian guy and the woman whose name I've already forgotten. When they all get killed in the department store. We then have kind of like keep having these scenes with Sasha where he's like, here's some chocolate and stuff, fucking tell me where this guy is. And then we have the factory scene, and it's never quite clear if Sasha is a genuine Nazi collaborator. They don't use that term, they shy right away from that term, or whether it's kind of like he's a double agent. It's very, very overly complicated, I thought.
Well, I think they do make it, they do hint that he's doing it for the Rush for, because he says
the Russians know about it, don't they?
Yeah,
they
he
know
says
that
to Jude Law, basically, I'm going to tell him that you go through this one vent here to get in. You'll be able to then be this guy at the top of this place. You'll be able to get the guy, and then he figures that out, doesn't he? And basically gives him the false information. And then, oh, Sasha, I wish you'd stay at home because then now I have to do what I'm going to do. I'm not going to. And you're like, oh, this guy's like, I mean, he hangs this kid. He fucking hangs. Like, the idea of this being a noble fight is reduced immediately by him being a Nazi and hanging kids, which is obviously what all Nazis did. And it's like, just fucking, this is such a just from a storytelling point of view, it's a great ending to your movie because it
someone has to die, don't they?
There has to be a sacrifice, and the sacrifice has to come from the main characters. And the reason, almost the story is punishing Danilov and punishing Zaitsev for their feud because it's got in the way. The sniping war battle between this German has got in the way of what's important, and Rachel Weisz's the love triangle. So almost the movie's saying, well, if you weren't so fucking busy having a massive argument and shooting each other, then this kid wouldn't have died, so fuck you. And it's and that culminates in the final kind of like rush of the movie, which is, oh, Sasha's mom, don't worry, he's fucked off to the Germans. That's fine. And if I was told that, I'd be like, is this the worst thing that could have happened? Because I was
going to say, the Nazis killed him. That's horrible. Oh, he's a Nazi collaborator. Maybe just tell her he's dead. I mean, maybe.
It was a horrible explosion. He definitely
he died a hero. He's going to get a whatever the Nazi, the Russian equivalent of the Iron Cross was.
The hero Stalin. Yeah,
he's going to get that, and he's going to be remembered as a hero of Stalin.
And then we're rushing into this horrible. There's something about the boats. The boats just could be fucking like.
War's terrifying, man. We've talked about this before. We're quite land-based individuals. We're not very.
Yeah. But the way that she's putting the sign, she puts that bit of paper up on the massive bit, and there's the shells are coming down, and she's getting, Rachel Weisz is bleeding out, like it's horrible, and it sets up the last scene of the movie, isn't it? Which we've talked about with Danilov sacrificing himself kind of needlessly.
Like, you could have achieved the same thing by like fucking holding a helmet up in the other across, which is what they do earlier.
German prisoner, dressing him up, just do what they did. Fucking send him out there.
They do that earlier as well. That's cool. And have him shoot him. That's fun. Who is it they have dressed as a German? I can't remember who it is.
One of
One of
the
the snipers.
snipers that they managed to capture.
That again is quite a cool, impactful scene and a bit clever in the way that it's done. But yeah, Danilov feels like this guy can't really live because we've established that he's like too heart torn from losing the love of his life, who he met 3 weeks ago, who's now shagging his best mate. So he just stands up and it's quite brutal. I like the way the shot's done, but I think like thematically it's just a bit near.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but the end of this movie, I think, is well constructed, and we get to we finish off. We get the reunion, which is nice because, you know, surprise, surprise, Rachel Weisz's character doesn't die.
She had plot armor, to be fair, Sam.
Yeah, amazing plot armor. And there's a, you know, is a nice ending that concludes both the movie. Completely ahistorical. It didn't happen like this. And who gives a fuck? Because it's a great story. Like, it's a great story. And that's what we're here for, isn't it?
Inverse of our Unbroken podcast, which we did a few weeks ago, where that is a movie where they stuck strenuously to the historical record and the memoir. Whereas in this movie, they were like, let's play a bit fast and loose. Let's just make it a good movie. And actually, what you then have is a really watchable, fun movie that, even though we are arch nerds, like, none of it offends me. None of the mistakes offend me. It's fine. I enjoyed it. I liked it. It's silly. It's fun. It's kind of quite violent and, you know, quite scary and nasty at some points, but ultimately, like, a really, really engaging watch. And what more can you ask from a movie? Keep me on my seat for 2 hours, like, and entertained. Baby, you've got a stew going.
And keep me coming back as well, you know, year after year. Like, that's the thing of I'll watch this movie every now and again, and I'll just enjoy it every time. And that's something I think there's a very few movies that can do that for me, that can just keep me gripped. You know, this is a classic. Goes back to the dad, goes back to being an old fucking man. Oh, it's Sunday afternoon. Oh, what's this? Oh, I'm just going to sit down and watch 10 minutes of this. And then 2 hours later, I'm still watching. Like, that's...
Oh, this is a total talking about going back in time. This is a total, like, I'm halfway through, but I'll sit and watch the other half sort of movie that comes on, and you're like, oh, well, that's finished. I'll flip the channel over. Oh, the second half of
Look at that sniper. That's cool. Well, wow, cool. Oh, look, a tank. This is how simple we are.
You're just watching it, and then
this is how stupid. we just see a tank. Oh, so sit down, watch a tank. Look, guys, a tank.
Entertaining. But no, I don't think I've got loads more to say about this.
No, let's get out of it.
And it's not like a super controversial or like trivia heavy movie either.
No, and I'm sure we can we'll do more movies like this, and I think it's a. But for me, like, this is one of my favorite war movies, and I think that's a good place to be. It's a good place to be sitting down and watching a good war movie like that.
We should do Behind Enemy Lines. Don't let me forget, because that's quite from what I remember, quite fun movie, and I think it's Owen Wilson. I must be wrong on that.
Owen Wilson, Gene Hackman, 90s Gene Hackman.
The Hackman.
Late 90s, 2000 Gene Hackman.
Yeah,
amazing.
Oh, it's Owen Wilson, who is like, you know, he's does stupid fucking Shanghai Noon movies with Jackie Chan and loads of other movies with his mates, but he's like oddly good in Behind Enemy Lines, and like quite serious, and it's a different conflict, I guess.
I can't wait for it to be an absolute disappointment that you're completely
yeah, I mean, remembering. If pushed, I would probably tell you that the John Travolta and other guy, Black Hawk Down, I'd probably tell you that I enjoyed that, and I'm certain.
Black Hawk Down, movie. Wow, there's another. What about Enemy of the State? If we're going to really confuse things, because that's Will Smith getting chased around by satellites with Gene Hackman. There's a connection.
What's the one? Is it the Jackal, where someone's trying to assassinate somebody, and I remember one scene really, really clearly, and they buy a gun or something from Jack Black, like a robot activated gun from Jack Black, and then they murder him with it. But he makes him run out to this field and hold up this pack of cigarettes, and it shoots the cigarettes, and then You can see Jack Black almost wets himself, like early Jack Black as well. And then this rifle just opens up on him and shoots him about 15 times. It's a total like, oh, all the tension's gone and then he's dead. It's a real, just for some reason it's stuck with me really well.
I can't wait. See you next week for late 90s,
Will you
early
remember
2000s dad
Tom?
movies. No. Dad movies. Welcome to Dad Movie Cast.
Dad Movie Cast. I'll have to find what that movie is. I think it's called The Jackal. Is it Bruce Willis?
I think it is. Yeah, sounds about right.
And I don't remember anything else about the movie.